today we're talking about something really sneaky, and it's something that shows up in our bank accounts, it shows up in our relationships, our calendars, and even when we're looking in the mirror. And it's called, hey, welcome to Wow Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk about all things mindset, all things confidence, and taking action, even when it feels scary. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Your mindset shapes everything. The way you think, the way you show up, the way you go after what you really want, and it all starts in your head. So if you've ever felt stuck, doubted yourself, or wondered if you're really capable of more, you're in the right place. Each week, let's break through those mental blocks, shift your perspective, and start making things happen. If you've ever said, I can't afford that, who am I to do that, or there's just not enough time, money, love, or luck for me, then yes, you've met it, and we all have. It's that silent fear in the background of our decisions. It's why some people with decent salaries still feel broke. It's why some people with loads of time still feel frantic. Scarcity isn't about your reality, it's about your relationship with it. And I suppose, if I'm being really honest, I used to live in that place. It did rule my life for a long time, especially when I was in debt. I had to claw my way out of that mindset before I could even touch the money, because if you don't shift your thinking, your circumstances won't matter. You'll just keep repeating the same story over and over. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep dive, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about what scarcity mindset really is, but also how it keeps you stuck and what it can sound like, but most importantly, how to shift it. So firstly, what is scarcity mindset? So, let's just start with the basics. Scarcity mindset is the belief that there's never enough, that there's not enough money, that there's not enough time, there's not enough opportunity, there's not enough you to go around. It's like being stuck in, I suppose, survival mode, for want of a better word. You're always thinking there's something missing. It's when that little inner voice becomes like a little pessimistic accountant. I'll never get ahead. If I take time off, I'll fall behind. If they win, I lose, and there's not enough to go around. And here's the maddest thing: it's got nothing to do with how much you actually have. You could have a good income, you could have a warm home, plenty of food in the fridge, and still feel anxious about money every single day, because scarcity lives in your brain. It's not living in your bank account. It's a belief system. It's not a bank statement. And you see it in your behaviors too. So any time that you're hoarding things, if you're hoarding your time or you're hoarding your money, if you panic when things go well because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, it's constant comparison and competition. I always say comparison is the thief of joy. It's saying yes to things when you mean no because you're afraid the opportunity won't come again. So it's sneaky like that. It dresses itself up as being sensible or being realistic, but it's actually fear in disguise. How does scarcity show up in your daily life? And I want to make this real, because here's how it might be playing out in your everyday life and you don't even realize it. So the first one is money. You tell yourself that you'll invest in yourself, you'll do that, you'll do that course, but you say to yourself, I'll do it when I've saved more. But then something always comes up, or you buy the cheaper version of everything, but then you end up spend more long term. My dad used to always say, you buy cheap, you buy twice. You feel guilty every time you spend on anything that isn't survival. The second way that it can be playing out in your everyday life is in time. You're always busy, but you're never productive. You say yes to stuff out of obligation. You panic when your calendar looks empty because you're afraid of missing out or being forgotten. The third way it can show up is in relationships. A lot of time you end up staying in draining friendships or in toxic relationships because deep down you think this is as good as it gets. You tolerate the disrespect because the idea of being alone feels a way worse than being mistreated. This girl I used to know, and her partner used to constantly cheat on her. And I used to be baffled as in like, why would you put up with that? But like, it comes back to that scarcity mindset. And, sometimes when I said it to her, she used to say like, oh yeah, but the thought of having to start all over again. I'm going, but surely it would be better to start all over again with somebody right and have your ladder against the right wall and opposed to the wrong wall. It'll also show up like in your work and your career. That might be that you undercharge or you don't ask for the promotion. You talk yourself out of applying maybe for a role or post on social media because there are already so many people doing that. Like, and I remember like when I started going down this route of posting on social media and doing the podcast, and I have a workshop coming up now and shortly too. And I remember like that scarcity mindset kicking in the beginning where I'm going, but who would listen to this? There's so many podcasts out there. There's so many people already posting. There's so many people already doing workshops and stuff like that. And I had to catch myself because I realized it was my scarcity mindset, kicking in. These things might seem like harmless on the surface, but actually over time, they cost you energy, they cost you opportunity, they cost you self-esteem, but most importantly, they cost you your peace of mind. For any of you that know me, a lot of you will like know my story. I didn't always have the mindset that I've got now, like, and believe you me, it was far from it. And, at one point when it was at like 78 grand debt, a lot of mornings it was hard to breathe, that anxiety, like it was thick. I used to dodge calls from the bank. If I saw like no ID number coming up on my phone, I wouldn't answer it. I dreaded the post, and it felt like a little bit like I was being hunted. That can be hard. And like even after I started, clawing my way out of that and earning more, like, in my head, I still had that scarcity mindset. I was terrified initially to invest in coaching in myself because I'd be still checking my bank app 3 times a day like it was going to disappear. And that's what scarcity does. It follows you around until you actually face it. So shifting that mindset took time. It took a lot of messy decisions. It took me doing things that felt backwards at the time. I suppose like spending money, like on coaching and stuff like that before I felt ready, setting boundaries when I was like terrified of rejection, and slowing down my brain when it was screaming at me to speed up. But here's what I learned: money, time, success, they all respond to energy. And I really do believe everything is a transfer of energy. You cannot create abundance while you're swimming like in this fear. So I know the question you're probably all asking, yeah, Sharon, that's all well and good, but like, how do you actually change it? So how do you shift out of scarcity? So I suppose this is stuff you've actually been waiting for. The first thing is, and I talk about this pretty much in anything I'm ever trying to change, my first go-to always is awareness. Okay. You can't change what you can't see. So start noticing your scarcity thoughts, like write them down, look at where they're popping up. And then, look at like, do you feel panic when a bill comes in? Do you hesitate to rest because you think you'll fall behind? So are you afraid to take that holiday because you're thinking of that you're going to lose out on work or you're going to fall behind in your work? Do you say, I can't afford that, without checking if it's really true? And, here's a challenge for you. The next time, you say to yourself that you can't afford something, ask yourself, how could I afford that? Because the question is it really about money or is it about fear? And when you start saying to yourself, how could I afford that? Or how could I do that? Your brain goes into like a solution mode in opposed to just focusing on the problem or on the fear or the negative. The second thing that you need to do is to take the opposite action. I always talk about like you need to do the opposite of what you feel. Scarcity actually shrinks you down. So to break it, you've got to expand even when it feels uncomfortable. So there's a few things that you can try. Tip more than you usually when it scares you. Okay. And I'm not saying that you leave yourself broke, but like, tip that little bit more. Say no to something that drains you. Invest in something that aligns with your growth. Like I invested in an online course like towards the end of last year. It cost a lot of money and it felt scary, but I knew that it was aligning with my growth and my overall vision and where I wanted to go. Another little tip thing then you could try is give your time or energy without fear it'll run out. And this isn't guise of it being reckless. It's about showing your brain that there's always more, and that's creating that abundance mindset. The other thing I want you to remember too is that, like, think of a gratitude that hits different. So it's not like just like, oh, I'm grateful for my dog or I'm grateful for my house. That's fine. But let's go a little bit deeper. So, try this format out. Like, what did I create today that I'm proud of? All right. What did I give or receive that made me feel, abundant today? Where did I feel like I had enough today? So when you focus on what's present and working, your brain starts to scan for abundance instead of threat. And that's science, like that's neuroscience. Your reticular activating system filters your reality based on what you believe. If I turn around and I say to you, like, focus on, white Audi TTs, you will suddenly start, and I bet you anyone, I think you got that in your brain now, you would suddenly start seeing white Audi TTs everywhere. It's not because they didn't suddenly, Audi didn't make more white Audi TTs because I mentioned it on a podcast today. It's just your reticular activating system, which is your RAS, is starting to filter that out because that's what you're focusing on. The next thing then you need to do is celebrate other people's wins. And I know sometimes this one can be hard, particularly if you don't feel that you're winning when, like when somebody else gets the house or they get the man or the job or the 6-figure launch, your brain can go straight to, well, that's never going to happen for me, or you start to feel sorry for yourself. But what if their win is just evidence of what is possible? What if it's proof that the universe is working and you're next? Because when you celebrate other people, you're actually telling your brain there's plenty to go around. And you stop seeing life as a competition and you start seeing it as more of like a buffet. Okay. There's more than enough for all of us. So before I ramp up, I'm going to give you listeners a challenge. So this is your mission for the week. So the first thing I want you to do is write down 5 scarcity thoughts that you notice over the course of today or the next few days. 5 scarcity thoughts that you notice and write them down. And then what I want you to do is I want you to flip each one with an abundant alternative. The next thing then is take one small opposite action each day to what you're actually feeling like. And the last thing I want you to do is to celebrate one person's win, whether it's publicly or privately, even if it stings a little bit. And if you're really, really bold, invest in something you've been putting off. That could be, time, energy, money, whatever scares you most, it'll shift your energy immediately. Just remember, the scarcity mindset, it's like, it is a sneaky little gremlin, but, it can be unlearned and you can unlearn it. If you open the door, to a life where you can actually breathe, where you're just not white knuckling your way through every decision. So thanks for tuning into Words of Wisdom. If this hit home, please share it with someone else who's still stuck in the not enough cycle. We all need reminders. Even me running this podcast, I got a reminder today. Remember, you're not selfish for wanting more. You're smart for recognizing your worth. So just a quick one before you go. Over 100 million people listen to podcasts on a daily basis. And while so many come looking for personal growth, most never actually hit follow. So if anything in this episode helped you to see things differently, to feel a bit stronger, or just breathe easier, then do me a massive favor and hit follow right here where you're listening. This means that you'll never miss an episode that might be exactly what you need to hear that day. And most importantly, the more this podcast grows, the more I can keep sharing real value and even open the door to bringing in incredible guests to support your journey. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. And that's my words of wisdom for today's episode of Wow. I hope this gives you something to think about, because remember, your mindset shapes your reality. The way you choose to think today will impact what you create tomorrow. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, tag me, or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Catch you next time.